Nadia had always believed in the magic of love. She and Adam, her husband of 5 years, had built a life full of laughter, late-night talks, and shared dreams. Their relationship seemed perfect, like something out of fairy tale. She was proud of how they supported each other, how they made every day feel special. So when their anniversary was approaching, she decided to surprise Adam with something extraordinary, something that would remind him just how much he meant to her. It had been a few weeks since they'd had a real getaway, and Nadia had been planning this night down to the last detail. She had arranged for a candlelit dinner, ordered Adam's favorite food, and even bought him a gift she knew he'd love. Everything was in place. All that was left was for Adam to return from his business trip and see the surprise she had been carefully preparing. Nadia felt a warm excitement flutter in her chest as she put the finishing touches on the dinner table. She smiled, imagining Adam's reaction when he walked through the door, his eyes lighting up in surprise. It was going to be a perfect evening. But as she straightened up from the table and glanced at the clock, a strange feeling crept up on her. It was 7 p.m. now. Adam's flight was supposed to land an hour ago. Why hadn't he called yet? She shrugged it off, figuring he was just caught up with something at the airport. It wasn't unusual for flights to be delayed. But something about the silence felt off, like a cloud of uncertainty hovering in the background. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Lena, her best friend. She read it quickly. "I'll be over in 10 minutes. Can't wait to see you." Lena had always been there for Nadia, through thick and thin. She was the one person Nadia could always count on. So, when Lena showed up at the door 10 minutes later, Nadia greeted her with a smile. But today, Lena's smile was different. It didn't reach her eyes. "Everything okay?" Nadia asked, trying to shake off the unease that had been building up in her chest. But before Lena could answer, the door opened again and Adam stepped inside. And that's when the world seemed to shift, the ground beneath Nadia's feet suddenly unsteady. Something was wrong, and she had no idea how deeply the truth was about to cut. Nadia sat back, taking a slow sip from her glass of wine. The evening was supposed to be a celebration, a night of joy. But as the hours ticked by and Adam still didn't arrive, she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that clung to her. The memories of their first meeting rushed back to her, memories that had once filled her heart with warmth. It seemed like just yesterday that she had met Adam at a coffee shop, both of them standing in line, awkwardly bumping into each other. Their laughter had been instant. There was something about the way Adam had smiled, genuine, effortless, that had drawn her in. They'd been inseparable ever since. They shared so many things, interests, dreams, even fears. Together, they had built a life they were both proud of. Adam had been her rock, her support system. They had bought a small house on the outskirts of town, and every weekend, they would spend hours doing small things, gardening, cooking, or just sitting by the fire, talking about the future. But lately, something had been off. Nadia hadn't been able to put her finger on it, but she noticed the small changes. Adam had become distant in a way that was hard to ignore. He would come home late from work, often with excuses that didn't quite add up. There were times when she would text him, only to get a reply hours later, or sometimes nothing at all. She tried to brush it off. After all, everyone had their off days, right? Maybe he was just busy with work. But the feeling kept gnawing at her, making it harder to ignore. Then there was Lena, her best friend. They had been close since college, and Nadia trusted her more than anyone. Lena was always there for her, listening to her problems, offering advice, and sharing in her happiness. If there was one person Nadia could rely on, it was Lena. And that's why, when Lena suggested she help with the surprise anniversary dinner, it felt natural. Lena knew Adam as well as Nadia did. She was happy to help. But recently, Lena's behavior had been strange. There was an odd tension between the two women that Nadia couldn't quite understand. It started a few months ago when Lena began spending more time with Adam. At first, Nadia didn't think much of it. After all, they were friends too. But the more she thought about it, the more uncomfortable she felt. The conversations between Lena and Adam seemed longer when Nadia wasn't around. Lena would sometimes send Adam a text in the middle of the night, and when Nadia asked about it, Adam would brush it off as nothing important. But the look in his eyes, the way he avoided her gaze, made her wonder. It was hard to ignore the small signs, the ones that felt like pieces of the puzzle that just didn't fit. But she loved Adam. She trusted him. She wanted to believe that nothing had changed between them. So she pushed the doubts away. She convinced herself that everything was fine. And now, here she was, sitting in the quiet of their home, the table set for two, the candles flickering gently. But Adam still hadn't returned. Nadia checked her phone again, hoping for a message, but there was nothing. She sighed and went to the kitchen to check on the food. The roast chicken was nearly done. The salad was perfectly prepared. It would be perfect when Adam finally walked through the door. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She quickly wiped her hands on a towel and went to answer it. Lena stood on the other side, her face tight with something Nadia couldn't quite place. "Hey, come on in," Nadia greeted, trying to keep the smile on her face. She stepped aside to let Lena in, but there was something different about the way Lena walked into the house. The usual warmth in her eyes was missing. Lena looked pale, as though something had weighed her down all day. "I was just about to check on dinner," Nadia said, trying to lighten the mood. "Want some wine?" Lena shook her head, her gaze flicking to the candles on the table. "No, I don't think I can stay long." Nadia frowned, her unease growing. "What's wrong? You look—" Before she could finish, the door creaked open, and Adam stepped inside. His expression was strained, his jaw tight. The tension between them was almost suffocating. He didn't seem surprised to see Lena there, but there was a coldness in his eyes that sent a chill down Nadia's spine. "Hey," Adam said, his voice low. His eyes moved from Nadia to Lena, then back again. He took a deep breath. "I need to talk to you, Nadia." Nadia's heart skipped a beat. There was something in his tone, something that made her stomach twist. "Talk? About what?" Lena shifted uncomfortably on the couch, her hands twisting in her lap. Maybe we should sit down," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. A knot formed in Nadia's chest. This wasn't how she had imagined their evening going. She had thought they'd sit down, eat dinner, and celebrate. Instead, something was wrong. Very wrong. Nadia's mind raced. What's going on? Why did Adam look like he had just been hit by a truck? And why was Lena acting so strange? The room suddenly felt too small, too hot. The silence stretched out, thick with tension. Nadia's eyes flicked between Adam and Lena, her pulse quickening. She didn't know what was coming, but she could feel it in the pit of her stomach. "Adam, what's going on?" she asked, her voice trembling. Adam looked at Lena again, his lips pressing into a thin line. "Nadia, there's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice low, almost apologetic. But the words that followed hit Nadia like a slap in the face, cold and sharp. And just like that, the world she had so carefully built with Adam started to crumble. The silence in the room was deafening. Every breath Nadia took seemed to echo in her ears, every heartbeat louder than the last. She felt like the ground beneath her was slowly giving way, her thoughts swirling in confusion. Adam stepped forward, his eyes locked on hers. There was a heaviness in his expression, as though he was carrying the weight of 1,000 regrets. "Nadia," he began, his voice breaking slightly. I don't know how to say this, but you need to know the truth." Nadia's heart pounded harder in her chest. She tried to steady her breath, but the unease inside her only grew. "What do you mean? What truth?" Her voice cracked, betraying the fear she felt rising in her throat. Lena, who had been sitting quietly on the couch, shifted uncomfortably. She had her arms wrapped tightly around her waist, her eyes avoiding Nadia's gaze. Nadia noticed the way her friend fidgeted, as though she was trying to disappear into the cushions of the sofa. The guilt in Lena's eyes was unmistakable, but Nadia couldn't yet understand why. "Nadia," Adam repeated, stepping closer. "This is hard for me to say, but I need to be honest with you. I've made a terrible mistake." Nadia's stomach churned. Her mind raced, but she couldn't make sense of it. What mistake? She had no idea where this conversation was headed. She glanced at Lena, who finally met her gaze, her eyes filled with sorrow. "Adam, what's going on?" Nadia asked again, her voice barely above a whisper. Adam hesitated, then exhaled slowly. I've been seeing someone else, he said, his voice strained and low, for the past few months. Nadia's world tilted. The words felt unreal, as if they had been pulled from someone else's nightmare. The room seemed to close in around her. Someone else? W, what are you talking about? She stammered, her chest tightening as panic crept in. She could feel the tears stinging the back of her eyes, but she fought them back, trying to hold herself together. Lena finally spoke, her voice thick with guilt. Nadia, it's true. Adam and we've been, she broke off, unable to finish the sentence. The words hung in the air like poison, and Nadia felt herself swaying as the truth began to settle in. She couldn't breathe. Adam and Lena? She turned to Lena, her face flushed with disbelief. You've been seeing him? Behind my back? Lena nodded, her eyes filled with tears now. I never meant for it to happen. It just did. I'm so sorry, Nadia. I never wanted to hurt you. Nadia's heart felt like it was being ripped out of her chest. The two people she loved and trusted most had betrayed her in the worst way imaginable. The weight of their confession was almost too much to bear. But why? Why would you do this to me? Nadia's voice broke as she turned to Adam. We've been happy. You've always said we were happy. I thought we were, Adam replied quietly, his voice full of shame. But I lost sight of what really mattered. I was selfish. I never meant for it to go this far. Nadia's head spun. She felt dizzy, like she was falling into some deep, dark hole. The world around her seemed to blur. She had to steady herself, placing her hand on the table to avoid collapsing. You don't get it, do you? She whispered, her voice raw. You've broken me. You've broken everything. Adam took a step forward, reaching out to her, but Nadia stepped back. She couldn't bear to be near him. She felt sick, disgusted by the way he had looked her in the eyes every day, pretending everything was fine while hiding the truth. I'm so sorry, Nadia, Adam said, his voice pleading. I never meant to hurt you. Lena's voice was softer now, almost as if she was speaking to herself. We never meant for this to happen. It started as a mistake. Something small. But then it got more. And now it's too late. Nadia's mind reeled. She couldn't process it all. She couldn't make sense of any of it. The pain was suffocating. You've been lying to me for months? She asked, her voice trembling with disbelief. And now you're telling me? Just like this? On our anniversary? Adam looked down at the floor, unable to meet her eyes. I couldn't keep lying to you any longer. I'm sorry. I don't know what else to say. I've ruined everything. The room fell into a heavy silence. The words, I'm sorry, hung in the air, but they were meaningless now. How could those words ever make up for what had been done? Nadia's chest tightened as a fresh wave of emotion crashed over her. She couldn't speak. She couldn't look at either of them anymore. The trust she had built with both of them, the love she had given them. It was all shattered in an instant. I need to go, she said quietly, her voice barely audible. She turned away from them both, walking slowly to the door, her heart breaking with every step. I can't be here with you right now. Lena stood up, her face pale and tear-streaked. Nadia, please, let me explain. But Nadia didn't turn around. She didn't want to hear it. She didn't want to hear anything they had to say. The betrayal was too much, too deep. She couldn't even process the shock and hurt that was flooding her. It was as though her body was moving on its own, carrying her away from the two people she had trusted more than anyone in the world. As she stepped out of the house and into the cool night air, she collapsed against the porch railing, her hands trembling as she tried to catch her breath. The tears that she'd been holding back for so long finally spilled over, and she let them fall freely, no longer caring who saw. Her heart felt like it was being torn apart, and the only thing she could think was, how could they do this to me? Nadia couldn't breathe. It felt like her chest had been caved in, a crushing weight pushing down on her heart. She staggered away from the house, the cold night air hitting her skin like a slap. Her legs were unsteady, and she almost collapsed on the porch steps, holding onto the railing for support. She looked up at the sky, the stars flickering coldly above her. How had it all come to this? It felt like a cruel joke, one that she didn't want to be a part of. Her life, her marriage, had been a dream, one that was now nothing more than shards of broken glass scattered across the floor. She could still hear their voices, Adam and Lena's words echoing in her mind. "We've been seeing each other for months. I never meant to hurt you. It just happened." They were all lies, empty words that couldn't undo the damage they had done. Nadia closed her eyes, willing the tears to stop, but they came in waves. She felt weak, so utterly small, as though the foundation of her world had been pulled from beneath her. How could Adam do this to me? How could Lena? Her mind kept circling back to the same question. Why didn't I see the signs? She had trusted them both. She had loved them. And now, they had destroyed everything she had worked for, everything she had believed in. There was no justification for this. No excuse that could make sense of the betrayal. Nadia wrapped her arms around herself, her fingers digging into her skin as if trying to hold herself together. She needed to think. She needed to make a decision, but her mind was too clouded by emotion to think clearly. Slowly, she stood up and began to walk. She didn't know where she was going, just away from the house, away from them, away from the pain. The streets were empty, and the world around her seemed eerily quiet. She could hear her own footsteps echoing in the silence, each one a reminder how alone she felt. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't even need to look at it to know who it was. Adam. He had been texting her since she left, begging for a chance to talk. But she didn't want to talk. She didn't want to hear his apologies or explanations. Nothing he said would change what had happened. How could I have been so blind? The self-doubt crept in, making her feel even more fragile. She thought about their entire relationship, every moment she had shared with Adam, all the good times, the laughter, the shared hopes of the future. It was all so real, so vivid, and now it felt like it had been built on lies. She couldn't trust her own memories anymore. Nadia found herself at a small park near their house, a place she and Adam had walked through many times. The swings creaked in the wind, the quiet stillness of the park now feeling ominous. She sat on one of the benches, staring at the empty playground. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Adam. It was Lena. The message read, "I'm so sorry, Nadia. I didn't want this to happen. Please, let me explain." Nadia's stomach turned. She knew Lena was sorry, but it didn't change the fact that she had betrayed her too. They were both guilty of the same thing, breaking her heart, destroying everything she had held dear. Could I ever forgive them? Could I ever trust them again? The answer was simple. No. Not now. Maybe not ever. The damage was done, and no amount of regret could undo the hurt she felt. Nadia stood up and began walking again, her feet moving on their own. She didn't know where she was going, but the thought of going back to the house, to see them both again, was unbearable. The memories of that home, the smell of Adam's cologne on the pillow, the way he would kiss her forehead before they went to sleep, seemed like a lifetime ago. She walked aimlessly for what felt like hours, her thoughts racing. She tried to hold on to something, anything, that could make sense of the mess her life had become. But there was nothing except the gnawing emptiness inside her. Finally, she found herself at a small cafe on the corner of a quiet street. It was late, but the lights inside were still on. The place was nearly empty, except for a few late-night workers. Without thinking, Nadia pushed open the door and stepped inside, the warmth of the cafe hitting her like a soft blanket. She sat at a table by the window, staring out at the dark streets. The night felt like a different world, a world where she could disappear and forget for just a moment that her life had fallen apart. The waiter brought her a cup of coffee without asking. She stared at it for a long time, the dark liquid swirling in the mug. Her fingers trembled as she wrapped her hands around the warm cup. As she sat there, the reality of everything hit her. She couldn't stay in that house anymore. She couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay, that Adam's words or Lena's apologies would somehow make it better. She needed to leave. Nadia had always prided herself on being strong, independent, but right now, she didn't feel strong. She didn't feel like herself at all. She was a stranger to her own life, and the only thing she could do was pick up the pieces and figure out how to move on. It wasn't going to be easy. She knew that. The pain was going to follow her for a long time, but she couldn't stay in the past. She couldn't keep letting Adam and Lena control her happiness. She stood up, her fingers still wrapped around the cup, and walked out of the cafe into the cold night air. It's time to take control of my own life, she thought, the words like a spark of defiance in her chest. There was no going back, no undoing the past, but there was a future waiting for her. And for the first time that night, Nadia realized that she had the strength to face it, alone but free. Nadia sat at the edge of her bed, her eyes scanning the empty room. The house that had once been filled with the sounds of laughter, shared memories, and dreams now felt cold and hollow. She had spent the past few days avoiding Adam's calls and Lena's messages, trying to numb the pain, trying to figure out what her next step would be. The reality of her situation had settled in like a heavy fog. Her marriage, the life she had built with Adam, was over. The betrayal had shattered everything she had trusted. But somehow, in the quiet of her room, amidst the wreckage, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel for days, a small but growing seed of strength. It hadn't been easy. It was the hardest thing she had ever done. To let go of someone she had loved so deeply, to cut ties with a friend she thought she could trust with her life. But Nadia had learned something important through all of this. She was capable of healing on her own. There had been moments in the past week when the tears felt endless, when she had wondered if she would ever be able to smile again. She had cried in the shower, in her car, on the floor of her bedroom. There were moments when she had cursed herself for not seeing the signs, for not trusting her instincts. The pain had felt so consuming, so relentless, that she thought she might drown in it, but she hadn't. Instead, she had found strength in the most unlikely of places, in the silence, in the solitude, in the quiet moments when she allowed herself to sit with the hurt instead of running from it. The truth was, she didn't know exactly where she was going or what the future held. For the first time in years, Nadia had no clear path to follow, no plans to make. She was standing at a crossroads, unsure which direction to take. But for the first time in her life, that uncertainty didn't terrify her. She was alone, but she wasn't lost. The phone buzzed beside her, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a text from Lena, the fourth one that day. The messages had all been the same. "I'm sorry. Please talk to me. We can fix this." Nadia sighed, staring at the screen. Part of her wanted to respond, to tell Lena everything she was feeling, to demand answers, to demand the truth. But another part of her knew that no words could fix what had been broken. She had given Lena so much of herself, trusted her with her most vulnerable moments, and yet Lena had chosen to betray her in the most hurtful way possible. The wounds were too deep for apologies. Nadia didn't respond to the message. She simply locked the phone and set it aside. In the following days, Nadia packed her things. She took her time, carefully sorting through the clothes, the books, the photographs, everything that had once belonged to her and Adam. She found herself reminiscing over memories that now felt distant and foreign, as though they belonged to someone else. There was a sadness in it, but there was also a strange sense of relief. She had lived in the shadow of that relationship for so long, believing that their love was invincible. But she had learned that nothing was invincible, not even love. Her therapist had told her that healing was a journey, and she hadn't fully understood that until now. She had thought that healing meant fixing the broken parts, patching them up until everything looked fine again. But now, she realized that healing wasn't about fixing what had been shattered. It was about learning to live with the cracks, about finding strength in the imperfections. Nadia had always been afraid of being alone, of facing life without the person she had once thought was her everything. But now, she understood that she was never really alone. She had herself. She had her own resilience, her own ability to overcome. And that was enough. By the time she was finished packing, there was a small sense of peace that had settled over her. She wasn't running from the pain anymore. She was walking away from it, choosing to take control of her own life, to rebuild it on her own terms. She didn't know what would come next. Maybe she would travel or start a new career. Maybe she would take a break and focus on herself. Maybe, someday, she would fall in love again. But whatever happened, she knew now that she could handle it. the fear that had gripped her before had loosened its hold, replaced by the quiet confidence of knowing she could survive this. As she closed the door to the house for the last time, Nadia felt the weight lift from her shoulders. There was no more pretending, no more waiting for things to get better on their own. She had taken the first step toward her new life, and even though the road ahead was unknown, she was ready to walk it. There was a quiet strength in moving on, and understanding that sometimes the only way forward was to leave the past behind. And as she walked away from the house that had once been her home, Nadia knew that her future was hers to shape. With each step she took, the weight of the past seemed to grow lighter. The tears were no longer tears of despair. They were tears of release, of saying goodbye to the person she had been and welcoming the person she was becoming. For the first time in a long while, Nadia felt free.